In the shadowed halls of Ashford Manor, a masked figure slips through the mist, a stolen sapphire whispers of curses, and a family's legacy teeters on the edge of ruin. Why has the reclusive Lord Ashford summoned the world's greatest detective, Hercule Poirot, to a glittering masquerade ball? What secrets lurk behind the painted smiles of the guests? Disguised as a flamboyant art dealer, Poirot weaves through a web of deceit-hidden passages, forged documents, and a staged séance that chills the blood. Each clue pulls him deeper into a feud that spans generations, where betrayal and greed dance in the shadows. Will Poirot unmask the mastermind before the sapphire's curse claims its next victim? Dive into a tale of suspense, where every glance hides a motive, and one brilliant mind holds the key to it all. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitation. The rain pattered against the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, a steady rhythm that matched the ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantel. The detective sat in his favourite armchair, a cup of tisane steaming beside him, his small, fastidious hands folded over a letter that had arrived that morning. The envelope bore no return address, only a wax seal embossed with an intricate cresta lion entwined with ivy. The paper itself was heavy, cream-coloured, and scented faintly of bergamot, hinting at wealth and secrecy. Poirot's moustache twitched as he reread the words, his grey eyes gleaming with curiosity. Monsieur Poirot. The letter began in a flowing script. Your reputation as a man of unparalleled intellect precedes you. I humbly request your presence at a masquerade ball at Ashford Manor this coming Saturday to unravel a matter of grave importance. A scandal threatens my family's legacy, and I dare not entrust it to lesser minds. Come in disguise, for discretion is paramount. Yours, Lord Reginald Ashford. Poirot leaned back, his fingers drumming a silent tattoo on the armrest. A masquerade ball, a scandal. Disguise, the words danced in his mind like pieces of a puzzle, each begging to be placed. He had heard of Ashford Manor, a sprawling estate in the Cotswolds, steeped in history and whispered rumours of hidden wealth. Lord Reginald, its reclusive master, was rarely seen in society, his name surfacing only in tales of eccentric collections and guarded secrets. Why summon Poirot now, and why insist on disguise? Mon ami, Poirot murmured to himself, the game is afoot, and Hercule Poirot shall play it with finesse. By Saturday evening, Poirot stood before a mirror, transformed. Gone was the immaculate black suit and polished shoes. In their place, he wore a burgundy velvet jacket, a ruffled cravat, and a silver tingle system, half-mask adorned with peacock feathers. His moustache was concealed beneath a waxed, theatrical version, and his hair was slicked with pomade to mimic the style of a flamboyant Frenchman. He had become Monsieur Antoine Dubois, an art dealer from Paris, known for his extravagant tastes and sharp tongue. A cane with a silver handle completed the ensemble, and Poirot practiced a jaunty twirl in front of the mirror. Parfait, he declared, his accent deliberately thickened. The disguise was not merely for the ball, it was a key to unlock the secrets of Ashford Manor. The journey to the Cotswolds was a blur of misty hills and winding roads, the chauffeur of the hired car navigating with quiet precision. Mind churned with possibilities. A scandal could mean many things: theft, betrayal, a hidden heir. The anonymity of a masquerade suggested the culprit was among the guests, someone close to Lord Ashford. Poirot's task was to observe, to listen, to see what others missed. Ashford Manor loomed out of the fog like a Gothic dream, its turrets piercing the twilight sky. Torches lined the gravel drive, their flames flickering in the damp air. Carriages and motorcars disgorged guests in a parade of silk, feathers, and glittering masks. Poirot adjusted his own mask, its peacock hues catching the light, and stepped into the throng. The grand hall was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms over a marble floor. Tapestries of mythical beasts adorned the walls, and a string quartet played a haunting waltz. Servants glided through the crowd with trays of champagne, their faces obscured by simple black masks. Poirot, as Monsieur Dubois, adopted a swaggering gait, his cane tapping a rhythm as he surveyed the room. He spotted Lord Reginald Ashford immediately. Tall, silver-haired man in a crimson domino, his posture rigid despite the festive atmosphere. Beside him stood a woman in a golden gown, her mask adorned with diamonds. Lady Ashford, Poirot presumed, her smile tight and practiced. A younger man, perhaps in his 30s, hovered nearby, his dark eyes restless behind a plain leather mask. The son, Lionel Ashford, known for his charm and reckless spending, according to society gossip. "Bonsoir, mademoiselle," Poirot exclaimed, bowing to a young woman in a sapphire blue dress. Her laughter was bright, and she curtsied, clearly charmed by his accent. "Monsieur, you are bold to approach without an introduction." "Antoine Dubois fears no convention," Poirot replied, kissing her gloved hand. "And you, ma chère, are too radiant to ignore." The woman blushed, and within minutes, Poirot had learned her name, Miss Evelyn Harrowand, that she was a distant cousin of the Ashfords. Invited to the ball as a gesture of familial goodwill, she spoke of the Manor's legendary art collection, mentioning a missing sapphire that had once been the centerpiece of a tiara worn by Lady Ashford's grandmother. "A sapphire, you say?" Poirot's interest sharpened, though his tone remained playful. "Lost, perhaps, in a game of love." Evelyn giggled. "Oh no, they say it was stolen years ago, but no one speaks of it. It's a family secret, you see." Poirot's smile widened. A missing heirloom, the scandal hinted at in the letter. He filed the information away, his eyes scanning the crowd. A woman in a black velvet gown caught his attention. Her mask was simple, yet her movements were too deliberate, her gaze too watchful. She lingered near a massive fireplace, her fingers tracing the stem of her glass. A governess, perhaps, or a companion. Someone who did not belong yet knew the Manor's rhythms. The music swelled, and Poirot joined the dance, partnering with a matron in emerald silk who prattled about the Ashfords' generosity. "Lord Reginald spares no expense," she said, her fan fluttering. "But there's tension in the air tonight. Have you noticed?" "Mais oui," Poirot replied, twirling her expertly. "The air, it crackles with secrets, none." The matron laughed, but her eyes darted to Lady Ashford, who was now speaking with a man in a wolf-shaped mask. Poirot noted the man's clenched fists, the subtle tilt of Lady Ashford's head. A disagreement, perhaps. As the dance ended, Poirot excused himself and approached a buffet table laden with delicacies, oysters, truffles, and delicate pastries shaped like swans. He selected a macaron, using the moment to observe Lord Ashford, who was now in a heated discussion with Lionel. Their voices were low, but Poirot caught fragments, debts, reputation, enough. He edged closer, pretending to admire. "A gilded candelabrum. You will not ruin us," Lord Ashford hissed, his mask doing little to hide his fury. Lionel's shoulders stiffened, but he said nothing, storming off toward the ballroom's edge. Poirot followed at a discreet distance, his cane silent on the plush carpet. Lionel paused near a velvet curtain, his hands fumbling with a cigarette case. A woman joined him there, one in black velvet. Her voice was a whisper, sharp and urgent. "You promised me, Lionel." Poirot's ears pricked. Promised what? He leaned against a pillar, feigning interest in a nearby statue of Apollo. The woman's hand grazed Lionel's arm, a gesture too intimate for a casual acquaintance. Before Poirot could hear more, a gong sounded, announcing dinner. The crowd surged toward the dining hall, and Poirot allowed himself to be swept along, his mind cataloguing every detail. The dining room was a cathedral of wealth, its table stretching beneath a fresco of cherubs and clouds. Poirot found himself seated between Miss Evelyn and a portly gentleman in a harlequin mask who introduced himself as Mr. Clarence Whitby, a banker with a penchant for port. The meal was exquisite roast pheasant, asparagus in hollandaise, and a sorbet that melted like spring snow. Poirot, as Dubois regaled his companions with tales of Parisian auctions, his exaggerated gestures drawing laughter. But his eyes never strayed far from the Ashfords. Lady Ashford presided over the table like a queen, her diamond mask glinting. She spoke of the manor's history, her voice smooth but edged with pride. "Our family has guarded its treasures for centuries," she said, her gaze sweeping the room. "No thief can diminish us." Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hand as she raised her glass. Fear or defiance? Across the table, the woman in black velvet sat beside Lionel, her posture rigid. Poirot caught her name, Miss Clara Beaumont, introduced as the governess to Lord Ashford's young ward, absent from the ball. Her eyes, visible through her mask, were sharp, missing nothing. Poirot sensed she was more than she seemed, a player in this unfolding drama. As dessert was served a chocolate tort, with edible gold, leaf-floored, Ashford rose, tapping his glass. "To masks and mysteries," he toasted, his voice warm but strained. "May we all reveal our true selves by dawn." The guests laughed, but Poirot felt the weight of the words. The Lord knew something was amiss. Had he summoned Poirot to unmask a traitor? After dinner, the guests returned to the ballroom, where the quartet struck up a lively mazurka. Poirot declined to dance, instead positioning himself near a window overlooking the misty gardens. The woman in black, Clara, stood alone, her gaze fixed on the darkness outside. Poirot approached, his cane clicking softly. "Mademoiselle, the night air is chilly, Nan, yet you seem drawn to it." She turned, her mask hiding her expression but not her tension. "I enjoy the quiet, Monsieur Dubois. The ballroom can be overwhelming." "Oui, but it is in the chaos that truth reveals itself," Poirot said, his tone light but probing. Clara's lips parted, but before she could reply, a commotion erupted near the center of the room. A young man in a jester's mask had spilled champagne on Lady Ashford's gown, and her sharp rebuke silenced the music for a moment. Poirot watched as Clara excused herself, slipping toward a side door. Intrigued, he followed, keeping to the shadows. The door led to a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced Ashfords, their eyes seeming to follow him. Clara's footsteps echoed ahead, then stopped. Poirot paused behind a suit of armor, listening. A low voicemail. "It's not here. We need to search again." Clara's reply was inaudible, but her tone was sharp. Poirot's heart quickened. The sapphire, perhaps. Before he could pursue, a hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find Lord Ashford, his crimson mask slightly askew. "Monsieur Dubois, you seem fascinated by my home's nooks and crannies," he said, his voice low. Poirot smiled, unfazed. "An art dealer's eye, it wanders, my lord. Your manor is a treasure trove." Lord Ashford studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Join me for a brandy tomorrow. We have much to discuss." "Avec plaisir," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. As Lord Ashford walked away, Poirot's mind raced. The invitation was no coincidence. The Lord suspected something, perhaps even Poirot's true identity. But for now, the disguise held. The ball continued into the early hours, but Poirot excused himself, claiming fatigue. A servant led him to a guest room, its four-poster bed draped in sapphire blue silk. As he removed his mask and costume, Poirot stood by the window, gazing at the fog-shrouded gardens. The sapphire, the whispers, the guarded glances, it was a tapestry of deceit, and he was only beginning to unravel its threads. He smiled, his reflection ghostly in the glass. The little grey cells were at work, and Monsieur Dubois had secured his place in the heart of the mystery. Ending, Poirot retired to his bed, satisfied with his seamless integration into the Ashford household, but the weight of the night's discoveries pressed upon him. A scandal loomed, dark and intricate, and he sensed the manor's glittering facade concealed a truth that would test even his brilliance. Chapter 2. Shadows in the gallery. The morning sun pierced the heavy drapes of Poirot's guest room at Ashford Manor, casting slanted rays across the sapphire blue bedspread. He rose early, his mind already threading together the fragments of last night's observations, the missing Ashford sapphire, Lionel's heated exchange with his father, and the enigmatic Clara Beaumont's whispered conversation. As Monsieur Antoine Dubois, the flamboyant art dealer, Poirot adjusted his burgundy jacket and peacock-feathered mask, now a half-mask to suit the day's less formal setting. His cane tapped a deliberate rhythm as he descended the grand staircase, ready to probe deeper into the manor's secrets. Breakfast was served in a sunlit conservatory, where glass walls framed a garden dusted with frost. The table was laden with silver platters of kedgeree, poached eggs, and freshly baked scones, their buttery aroma mingling with the scent of hothouse roses. Lord Ashford presided at the head, his crimson domino replaced by a sombre grey suit, though his eyes retained their wary sharpness. Lady Ashford, in a lavender morning dress, sipped tea with calculated grace, while Lionel slouched beside her, his face pale from a night of excess. Clara Beaumont was absent, and Poirot noted the empty chair with interest. "Bon matin, Mies Amos," Poirot announced, sweeping into the room with a flourish. "The air of Ashford Manor, it invigorates the soul, Nan." His exaggerated accent drew smiles from the other guests, including Miss Evelyn Harrow, whose sapphire blue dress echoed the night before. She gestured to the seat beside her, and Poirot accepted, his eyes scanning the room for subtle cues. "Lord." Ashford cleared his throat. "Monsieur Dubois, I trust you slept well. We have a treat for our guests today, a tour of the Manor's art gallery. Your expertise would be most welcome." Poirot's moustache twitched beneath its wax disguise. "An honor, my lord. Art, it speaks where words conceal." The invitation was no coincidence. Lord Ashford was testing him, perhaps suspecting the art dealer was more than he seemed. Poirot relished the challenge. After breakfast, the guests gathered in the gallery, a long vaulted hall lined with paintings in gilded frames. Sunlight streamed through arched windows, illuminating portraits of Ashford ancestors, their stern gazes fixed on eternity. Marble busts stood sentinel between canvases, and a massive chandelier hung like a frozen cascade of light. Poirot, as Dubois strutted among the artworks, his cane pointing at a Rubens with theatrical admiration, magnified the brushstrokes, they dance with passion. Lady Ashford, guiding the tour, paused before a portrait of a woman in a tiara, her eyes sparkling with sapphires. "This is my grandmother, Lady Beatrice," she said, her voice tinged with pride. Her tiara once held the Ashford sapphire, a gem of unparalleled beauty, lost, sadly, to time. Poirot tilted his head, feigning curiosity. "Lost, you say? A tragedy for such a family. Perhaps it hides in plain sight, Nan." His words were light, but he watched Lady Ashford's reaction, a flicker of unease in her diamond-bright eyes. The other guests murmured, some exchanging glances. The sapphire was no mere legend. Its absence was a wound in the family's pride. As the tour continued, Poirot lingered near a still life of fruit and flowers, its dark background hinting at a hidden panel. He tapped the frame lightly, his ears attuned to the hollow echo. Secret compartment. Before he could investigate, Clara Beaumont appeared at the gallery's far end, her black dress stark against the opulence. She carried a leather-bound book, her movements precise, like a cat stalking prey. Poirot excused himself from Evelyn's chatter and approached, his cane clicking softly. "Mademoiselle Beaumont," he greeted, bowing. "You missed the delights of breakfast. The scones, they were a poem in pastry." Clara's lips curved, but her eyes were guarded. "I had duties to attend, Monsieur Dubois. The young master's lessons wait for no one." "Been, sir," Poirot said, his tone playful. "But a governess with such poise, she must also appreciate art, Nan. Tell me, what speaks to you in this gallery?" He gestured to a nearby painting of a stormy sea, its waves churning with menace. Clara hesitated, then said, "The shadows. They hide more than they reveal." Her words were a challenge, and Poirot's mind sparked. Was she referring to the paintings or something deeper? Before he could press, Lord Ashford called the group to a display case holding a collection of jeweled daggers. Clara slipped away, and Poirot let her go, knowing pursuit would raise suspicion. The tour ended, and the guests dispersed for luncheon. Poirot, however, lingered in the gallery, his fingers tracing the frame of the still life. With a gentle press, the frame clicked, revealing a narrow panel. Inside was a velvet-lined niche, empty but bearing the faint outline of a circular object perhaps. A gem. Poirot's heart quickened. The sapphire had been here once, he was certain, but who had moved it, and why? At luncheon, served in a dining room adorned with tapestries of hunting scenes, Poirot sat opposite Lionel, whose mood had soured. Further, the young man toyed with his food, his eyes darting to his mother, who conversed with Mr. Whitby, the banker from the ball. Poirot, as Dubois, launched into a tale of a Parisian auction where a fake Rembrandt fooled the elite, watching life. "Reaction, the cleverest forgeries," he said, "are those that mimic the heart's desire." Lionel's fork clattered against his plate. "Some desires cost too much," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Poirot noted the flush in his cheeks, the way his hand trembled. Debts, perhaps. A motive for theft. Before Poirot could probe further, a low hum filled the room, followed by a sudden darkness. The electric lights flickered and died, plunging the dining room into shadow. Gasps rippled through the guests, and a woman, Evelyn Poirot. A scream, "Stay calm, Lord Ashford's voice boomed. The generator often falters. Poirot's senses sharpened. In the dim light from the windows, he saw Clara rise and move toward the door. Then, from the direction of the gallery, came a piercing shriek, followed by the crash of breaking glass. The guests froze, their murmurs rising to panic. Poirot slipped from his chair, his cane silent as he navigated the shadowed room. The lights returned with a buzz, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Lord Ashford was already striding toward the gallery, the guests trailing behind. Poirot followed, his mind racing. The shriek had been deliberate. He was sure a distraction, perhaps, or a signal. In the gallery, the group found a small landscape painting, a pastoral scene of rolling hills, lying on the floor, its canvas slashed. Glass from its frame glittered like frost across the marble. Lady Ashford's hand flew to her throat. Who would do this? She demanded, her voice trembling with outrage. The guests murmured, some pointing to the open window, where a breeze stirred the curtains. A thief, Mr. Whitby suggested, his harlequin mask long discarded, or a prankster. Poirot knelt beside the painting, his eyes scanning the jagged tear. The cut was precise, not the work of a reckless vandal. He glanced at the empty niche he'd discovered earlier, then at the faces around him. Clara stood at the edge of the group, her expression unreadable. Lionel's jaw was tight, his hands shoved into his pockets. Lord Ashford's gaze lingered on the painting, his lips pressed thin. Monsieur Dubois, Lord Ashford said, turning to Poirot. You know art. Is this salvageable? Poirot rose, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeves. The canvas, it may be repaired, but the motive, it intrigues me more. This was no accident, my lord. His words hung in the air, and he saw eyes narrow slightly. Had she caught his meaning? The group dispersed, the mood somber. Lord Ashford ordered the painting removed for restoration, and Poirot used the moment to slip back to the still life. The niche remained empty, but he noticed a faint scratch on the velvet lining, as if something had been hastily removed. The sapphire, or another clue. As the afternoon waned, Poirot joined the guests for tea in the drawing-room, where a fire crackled against the autumn chill. He chatted with Evelyn, who speculated about the slashed painting, her theories wild but endearing. Perhaps it's the sapphire's curse, she whispered, her eyes wide. They say it brings ruin to those who touch it. Poirot chuckled, but his mind was elsewhere. The slashed painting was a diversion. He was certain, meant to draw attention from something else. But what, and who was behind it? Clara's absence at tea was notable, and Lionel's restless pacing by the window suggested guilt or fear. Lord Ashford, meanwhile, watched his guests with the intensity of a hawk as the sun dipped below the horizon. Poirot excused himself, claiming a need for rest. In truth, he needed solitude to let his little grey cells work. In his room, he paced before the fireplace, reconstructing the day's events. The empty niche, the slashed painting, Clara's cryptic words about shadows, they were pieces of a larger puzzle. Someone in the manor was playing a dangerous game, and Poirot, as Dubois, was perfectly positioned to unmask them. Ending, Poirot retired for the night, his cane resting against the bedpost, his mind alight with possibilities. He was pleased with his progress, having identified key suspects and a potential hiding place for the sapphire. Yet he remained cautious, sensing the saboteur's eyes upon him, hidden in the manor's shadowed corners. Chapter 3. The Hidden Passage. The dawn light filtered through the heavy drapes of Poirot's guest room, casting a soft glow over the sapphire blue furnishings. He rose with the precision of a man accustomed to order, his mind already dissecting the previous day's discoveries, the empty niche behind the still life, the slashed painting, and Clara Beaumont's enigmatic remark about shadows. As Monsieur Antoine Dubois, the flamboyant art dealer, he adjusted his burgundy jacket and selected a simpler mask for the Dea sleek silver domino that left his waxed mustache on display. His cane, a faithful prop, rested in his hand as he prepared to delve deeper into Ashford Manor's secrets. The morning was crisp, the air carrying the scent of damp leaves as Poirot joined the guests for a leisurely stroll through the Manor's gardens. Lord Ashford led the group, his grey suit immaculate, though his eyes betrayed a sleepless night. Lady Ashford walked beside him, her lavender shawl fluttering like a moth's wings, while Lionel trailed behind, his expression sullen. Clara Beaumont was present, her black dress replaced by a charcoal grey one, her demeanour as guarded as ever. Poirot noted her careful distance from Lionel, though their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange that piqued his curiosity. Magnifique, these gardens, Poirot exclaimed, twirling his cane as he admired a rosebush sculpted into a perfect sphere. The symmetry, it speaks of a disciplined hand, Nan. His comment drew a nod from Lord Ashford, who gestured to an elderly groundskeeper pruning a hedge nearby. The man, weathered as the oak trees around him, glanced up with a scowl before returning to his work. Miss Evelyn Harrow, ever eager, fell into step beside Poirot. "They say the gardens hide secrets," she whispered, her eyes bright with mischief. "Tunnels, even from the old days of smugglers." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Tunnels, mademoiselle. A fanciful tale, perhaps, but one worth exploring." Her words planted a seed, and he resolved to investigate the Manor's less public corners. The slashed painting had been a distraction, he was certain, but from what? The sapphire's hiding place, or something more sinister? After the stroll, the guests were invited to the library for coffee, a room that exuded the weight of centuries. Oak shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes and curious ivory carvings, a brass astrolabe, a faded map of the Cotswolds. Poirot, as Dubois, feigned interest in a first-edition Voltaire, but his eyes roamed the shelves. For anomalies, a faint draught brushed his cheek, coming from a section of books on heraldry. He ran his fingers along the spines, feeling for irregularities, and paused at a tome titled The Lineage of Ashford. A gentle tug revealed a click, and the shelf shifted slightly, exposing a sliver of darkness. Poirot's heart quickened, but he stepped back as Lady Ashford approached, her lavender shawl trailing like a royal train. "Monsieur Dubois, you have a scholar's eye," she said, her smile tight. "Do you find our collection impressive?" "Immensement, my lady," Poirot replied, bowing. "But it is the secrets between the pages that intrigue me most." Her eyes flickered, and he wondered if she suspected his discovery. He let the moment pass, joining the others for coffee. But his mind was fixed on the hidden passage. At noon, the guests scattered, some to play croquet, others to nap. Poirot seized the opportunity, slipping back to the library. The Manor was quiet, save for the distant clink of teacups and the groundskeeper's rake scraping the gravel outside. He pulled the Lineage of Ashford again, and the shelf swung inward, revealing a narrow stone passage, its air damp and musty. Lighting a small pocket torch carefully concealed in his cane, Poirot stepped inside. His footsteps echoing softly, the passage descended in a gentle spiral, its walls etched with moss, and the faint outlines of carved initials some centuries old. At its end was a small chamber, its floor covered in dust that bore no footprints but his own. A wooden chest sat against one wall, its lock rusted but intact. Beside it, a stack of yellowed letters and a portrait of a stern-faced man in Regency. Attire, his eyes eerily similar to Lord Ashford's. Poirot opened the chest, finding only a bundle of documents tied with faded ribbon. The letters, written in a spidery hand, detailed a feud between the Ashfords and the Graysons, a rival family who once claimed ownership of the sapphire. One letter, dated 1842, accused the Graysons of theft, vowing retribution. "The gem is ours by right," it read, "and no curse shall keep it from us." Poirot's mind raced. A feud spanning generations could explain the sapphire's disappearance and the current tension in the manor. Was someone seeking to reclaim it? He pocketed a single letter, careful to disturb nothing else, and retraced his steps. As he reached the passage's entrance, a creak froze him in place. The shelf was still ajar, but a shadow moved beyond it. He doused his torch and pressed against the wall, listening. Soft footsteps retreated, followed by the library door's faint click. Emerging cautiously, Poirot found the library empty, but a book lay askew on a nearby table, a history of gemstones, open to a page on sapphires. A coincidence? Unlikely. Someone had been watching, perhaps aware of his discovery. He replaced the lineage of Ashford, ensuring the passage remained hidden, and joined the guests for afternoon tea in the drawing room. The tea was a tense affair, served on delicate porcelain, with sandwiches cut into perfect triangles. Poirot, as Dubois, regaled Mr. Whitby with the tale of a cursed emerald he'd once appraised, watching Lionel from the corner of his eye. The young man was restless, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on his saucer. Poirot leaned toward him, his voice low. "Monsieur Lionel, you seem distracted. Perhaps a game of cards would lift your spirits. In Paris, we wager secrets instead of gold." Lionel's eyes narrowed, but he forced a smile. "I've wagered enough already, Dubois. Some debts can't be paid with secrets." His words confirmed Poirot's suspicion Lionel was entangled in financial ruin, a motive for desperate acts. Before Poirot could press further, the groundskeeper appeared at the drawing room's entrance, his weathered face grim. He approached. "Lord Ashford," whispering urgently. Poirot caught the words trapdoor and unstable. Lord Ashford's expression darkened, and he excused himself, beckoning the groundskeeper to follow. Poirot seized the moment, slipping away under the pretense of fetching a handkerchief. He followed the men to a secluded corner of the garden, where a stone slab lay half hidden beneath ivy. The groundskeeper lifted it, revealing a rusted iron. "Trapdoor. Found it this morning," he muttered. "It's old, my lord, and the hinges are shot. Could collapse if someone steps wrong." Poirot, hidden behind a yew hedge, listened intently. A trapdoor suggested another entrance to the manor's underbelly, perhaps linked to the passage he'd found. As Lord Ashford and the groundskeeper debated repairs, Poirot edged closer, his foot catching on a loose stone. The noise was slight, but the groundskeeper's head snapped up. "Who's there?" he growled. Poirot stepped forward, his Dubois persona intact. "Pardonnez-moi, messieurs. I merely admire the roses." He gestured to a nearby bush, his smile disarming. Lord Ashford frowned but waved him off, and Poirot retreated, his heart pounding. The trapdoor was a clue, but its discovery had nearly exposed him. Back in the drawing room, Poirot rejoined the guests, his mind weaving connections. The hidden passage, the Grayson feud, Lionel's debts, and now a trapdoorage was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. Clara, sitting quietly with a cup of tea, met his gaze for a moment, her eyes unreadable. Did she know of the passage? Was she the shadow in the library? As evening approached, the groundskeeper's voice echoed in Poirot's mind. Ghosts in the walls, they say. Best not to poke where you don't belong. A warning, perhaps, or a threat. Poirot smiled to himself, undeterred. The little grey cells thrived on such challenges. Ending, Poirot returned to his room, pleased with his discovery of the hidden passage and its secrets, but cautious. The manor's shadows were alive with watchers, and he sensed the saboteur was closer than ever, their next move poised to strike. Chapter 4. The Masked Intruder. The night wrapped Ashford Manor in a shroud of mist, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. Hercule Poirot, still cloaked in the guise of Monsieur Antoine Dubois, stood by his guest-room window, the silver domino mask resting on the bedside table. His mind churned with the day's revelations, the hidden passage, the Grayson feud, and the trapdoor's ominous warning. The slashed painting and the empty niche pointed to a calculated plot, and Poirot sensed the threads were tightening round. The Ashford sapphire. He adjusted his burgundy jacket, ensuring his Kainit's concealed torch, intact, was close at hand. Tonight he would hunt for answers. Dinner had been a subdued affair, the guests weary from the day's tensions. Lord Ashford had spoken little, his eyes darting to the windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. Lady Ashford maintained her regal poise, though her laughter rang hollow. Lionel, pale and distracted, had excused himself early, while Clara Beaumont's absence was noted only by Poirot. Her shadow loomed large in his suspicions. Her cryptic words in the gallery, "The shadows hide more than they reveal," echoing like a challenge as midnight approached. Poirot slipped from his room, his footsteps muffled on the plush corridor. Carpet, the manor was silent, save for the creak of settling wood and the distant howl of wind. He paused at a landing overlooking the gardens, where the mist swirled like spectres. A flicker of movement caught his arger figure in a dark cloak, masked and swift, darting across the lawn toward the greenhouse. Poirot's pulse quickened. An intruder or a conspirator? He descended a back staircase, avoiding the main hall where a lone servant polished silver. The greenhouse stood at the garden's edge, its glass panes fogged with condensation. Poirot approached, his cane tapping softly, and tested the door. Locked, undeterred. He circled the structure, finding a small window ajar. With a glance to ensure he was unseen, he climbed through, his agility belying his fastidious appearance. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and exotic blooms. Orchids and ferns crowded the space, their leaves brushing Poirot's sleeves as he moved. The cloaked figure was nowhere in sight, but a faint rustle led him to a workbench cluttered with pots and tools. Beneath a tarp, he found a wooden crate, its lid pried open. Inside were documents, letters, receipts, and ledgers, all in a hurried scrawl. Poirot's torch illuminated a name, Lionel Ashford. The papers detailed transactions for jewellery, including a sapphire sold to a dealer in London. Forgeries, Poirot suspected, designed to implicate Lionel in theft. A creak behind him made Poirot spin, his cane raised. Clara Beaumont stood in the doorway, her grey dress blending with the shadows, her face unmasked but pale. "Monsieur Dubois," she said, her voice low and sharp, "you have a habit of wandering where you shouldn't." Poirot lowered his cane, his Dubois persona intact. Mademoiselle, the orchids of Ashford Manor, they call to an art dealer's soul. And you, what brings you to this humid sanctuary? His tone was light, but his eyes locked onto hers. Searching for a crack in her composure, Clara stepped closer, her hands clasped tightly. I was checking the plants. The storm could damage them. Her lie was smooth, but Poirot caught the tremor in her fingers. She knew of the crate, he was certain. Bean, sir, he said, smiling. But these papers, they are more intriguing than petals, Nan. They speak of theft, of betrayal. He held up a forged receipt, watching her reaction. Clara's eyes widened, then narrowed. You're meddling in things you don't understand, she hissed, turning to leave. Poirot stepped forward, his voice dropping its theatrical lilt for a moment. Mademoiselle, the truth, it is like an orchid, blooms only when tended with care. Tell me what you know. Clara froze, her back to him. I promised to protect someone, she whispered, then fled into the night, her footsteps swallowed by the storm's rising wail. Poirot let her go, knowing pursuit would yield little. Instead, he examined the documents further, noting dates and signatures that matched Lionel's hand but were too perfect, too deliberate. A setup, he concluded, but by whom? To test his theory, Poirot replaced the documents, altering one receipt to include a fictional buyer's name, Madame Lefebvre, a nod to a Parisian acquaintance. If the forger returned, they might react to the change, revealing their hand. He covered the crate and exited the greenhouse. The rain now, a steady drumbeat against the glass. Back in the manor, Poirot navigated the darkened corridors, his torch casting long shadows. As he passed the library, a faint glow spilled from beneath. The door, he eased it open, finding Lionel hunched over a desk, a brandy glass in hand. The young man's eyes were bloodshot, his tie loosened. Dubois, he muttered, can't sleep either. Poirot seized the moment, sitting opposite him. The storm, it unsettles the mind, Nan. And yet, I sense it is not the weather that troubles you. He leaned forward, his voice soft. Debts, perhaps, or secrets that weigh heavier than gold. Lionel's glass trembled. You talk too much, Frenchman. But his bravado crumbled, and he slumped back. I owe money more than I can pay, but I'd never steal from my own family. Those papers, someone's trying to ruin me. Poirot's mind clicked. Lionel was a pawn, not the mastermind. Who, Monsieur Lionel? Who would frame you? But Lionel shook his head, draining his glass and staggering to his feet. Ask Clara, he muttered, then stumbled out, leaving Poirot alone with the ticking of a grandfather clock. The encounter confirmed Poirot's suspicions. Clara was central to the plot, but her role victim or villain remained unclear. He returned to his room, the storm now raging outside, lightning illuminating the sapphire blue drapes. Before retiring, he rigged a simple trapper thread tied across his doorway, invisible in the dark. If the intruder came for him, he would know. As he lay in bed, Poirot's thoughts wove a tapestry of motives. The forged documents pointed to a scheme to discredit Lionel, perhaps to shift blame for the sapphire's theft. Clara's presence in the greenhouse suggested she was either protecting Lionel or manipulating him. And the cloaked figure, were they her accomplice or another player entirely? The manor's secrets were like the storm outside, wild, unpredictable, and ready to break. Ending, Poirot drifted to sleep, satisfied with his trap and the night's discoveries, but cautious. The forged documents and Clara's flight confirmed a conspiracy, yet the true mastermind remained in the shadows, watching his every move. Tomorrow he would tighten the net, but for now he rested, his little grey cells alert even in slumber. Chapter 5. The sapphires cursed the storm had passed by morning, leaving Ashford Manor bathed in a brittle, golden light. Hercule Poirot, still cloaked in the flamboyant guise of Monsieur Antoine Dubois, checked the thread across his doorway. No intruder had dared his room, but the night's discoveries burned in his mind. The forged documents in the greenhouse, Clara Beaumont's cryptic flight, and Lionel's desperate confession of debts. The Ashford sapphire, or its absence, was the heart of this mystery, and Poirot sensed the threads were converging. He adjusted his silver domino mask, its sleek lines complementing his burgundy jacket, and gripped his cane, ready to orchestrate the next move. Breakfast was a tense affair in the conservatory, the glass walls reflecting the guests' strained faces. Lord Ashford's jaw was set, his gaze fixed on the gardens where dew glistened like scattered jewels. Lady Ashford's lavender gloves trembled as she poured tea, and Lionel, nursing a headache, avoided eye contact. Clara Beaumont sat at the table's edge, her charcoal dress severe, her expression a mask of calm that Poirot found too perfect. Miss Evelyn Harrow, ever the optimist, chatted about the storm, oblivious to the undercurrents. Poirot, as Dubois, leaned toward Evelyn with a theatrical sigh. "Mademoiselle, last night's tempest, it stirs the imagination, Nan. In Paris, we say storms awaken ghosts and curses." His words were light, but he watched Clara, noting the slight tightening of her lips. Curses. Evelyn giggled, her eyes wide. "You mean the sapphire's curse? They say it dooms anyone who steals it." Lady Ashford's teacup clattered against its saucer. "Nonsense," she said sharply. "The sapphire is merely lost, not cursed." But her voice wavered, and Poirot filed away her unease. The curse, whether real or fabricated, was a lever he could use. Seizing the moment, Poirot clapped his hands. "Mes amis, why not a séance this evening, to appease these restless spirits, and uncover truths hidden in the shadows?" His suggestion, delivered with Dubois flair, sparked murmurs of excitement. Lord Ashford frowned, but nodded, perhaps sensing an opportunity to flush out secrets. Clara's eyes met Poirot's briefly, sharp as a blade, before she looked away. The day passed in a blur of croquet and polite conversation, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere. He slipped into the library, rechecking the hidden passage's entrance. The shelf remained undisturbed, but a faint scent of lavender lingered Lady Ashford's perfume. He resolved to keep her in his sights. At luncheon, he steered the conversation toward family legends, coaxing Evelyn to recount tales of the sapphire's curse. "They say it glows in the dark," she whispered, "and brings ruin to thieves." Lionel snorted, his voice bitter. "Ruin comes without curses, believe me." Poirot noted his clenched fists, the way Clara's hand brushed his under the table, a gesture of comfort or control. As dusk fell, the guests gathered in the drawing room for the séance, the air thick with anticipation. Poirot, as Dubois, had arranged the setting, a round table draped in black velvet, a single candle flickering at its center, and heavy curtains drawn to block the fading light. The guests took their seats, Lord and Lady Ashford, Lionel, Clara, Evelyn, and Mr. Whitby, whose banker's skepticism was tempered by curiosity. Poirot, seated between Evelyn and Clara, adopted a theatrical tone. "Mes amis, we call upon the spirits to reveal what is hidden. Join hands, and let the truth emerge. The candle's flame danced, casting eerie shadows. Poirot's eyes, sharp behind his mask, watched each face. Lady Ashford's grip on Lord Ashford's hand was tight. Lionel's jaw twitched, and Clara's breathing was too controlled. Poirot began with a low chant, nonsense words in French to set the mood, then fell silent, letting the tension build. A faint creak came from the far wall, and Evelyn gasped. What was that? Before anyone could answer, the candle flickered violently, and a low moan echoed through the room. Lady Ashford's eyes widened, and she clutched her chest. "The curse," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's real." Poirot's senses sharpened. The moan was too deliberate, the timing too perfect. He glanced at the wall, noting a faint seam near a gilt-framed mirror, a hidden panel, perhaps. Before he could investigate, a spectral figure appeared in the room's centaur, a translucent shape in a flowing gown, its face obscured. The guests gasped, and Lady Ashford collapsed, fainting into her chair. Chaos erupted. Evelyn screamed, Mr. Whitby called for brandy, and Lionel rushed to his mother's side. Poirot, however, remained calm, his eyes fixed on the figure. It shimmered, then vanished as the candle flared back to life. He rose, moving to the mirror, and pressed its frame. A click revealed a narrow space behind it, empty but for a small projector and a thin silk screen. A staged illusion, he deduced, designed to terrify. As Lady Ashford was revived, her face ashen, Poirot seized the moment. "The spirits, they are clever, Nan, but so is Antoine Dubois." He turned to Lionel, his voice sharp. "Monsieur, you know of this trick, I think. Speak." Lionel's face crumpled, his defiance gone. I set it up," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I thought if Mother believed the curse, she'd reveal where the sapphire is hidden. I need the money, Dubois. I'm drowning in debt." The guests gasped, but Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara, whose expression was unreadable. "And you, mademoiselle, did you assist in this charade?" Clara shook her head, but her silence spoke volumes. Poirot pressed on, addressing the room. "The sapphire is not stolen, I wager, but hidden, and someone here knows where." Lord Ashford's eyes narrowed. "Enough of this, Dubois. You overstep." But Poirot saw the fear in his gaze, fear of exposure, perhaps. The séance ended abruptly, the guests retiring in unease. Poirot lingered, examining the projector's wiring. It was crude, easily assembled, but effective. Lionel's confession was a breakthrough, but Poirot suspected he was a pawn in a larger game. As he returned to his room, Poirot found a folded note slipped under his door, written in a hurried scrawl. "The sapphire is closer than you think. Look to the heart." The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the scent of lavender clung to the paper. Lady Ashford again, or a clever misdirection. He tucked the note into his pocket, his mind racing. The heart could mean many things: a person, a place, a symbol. The statue in the gallery, perhaps, with its hollow base. Poirot sat by the fire, piecing together the puzzle. Lionel's desperation made him vulnerable, but the projector's sophistication suggested another hand. Clara's silence and the forged documents pointed to her involvement, yet her motives remained opaque. The note hinted at an Ailora trap. The sapphire's curse, whether real or not, was a tool to manipulate, and Poirot was determined to wield it himself. Ending, Poirot retired for the night, pleased with unravelling the séance's ruse and Lionel's confession, but a chilling realization struck. The true mastermind was steps ahead, their identity hidden in the manor's heart. He would unmask them soon, but for now he rested, his little grey cells poised for the final act. Chapter 6. The grand unveiling. The morning sun cast long shadows across Ashford Manor, its golden rays doing little to dispel the chill of secrets that clung to the estate. Hercule Poirot, shedding the last traces of Monsieur Antoine Dubois, stood before his guest-room mirror, his true self restored. The burgundy jacket and silver domino mask lay folded on a chair, replaced by his immaculate black suit and polished shoes. His moustache, freed from its wax disguise, twitched with anticipation. The threads of the mystery, the hidden passage, the forged documents, the staged séance, and the cryptic note had woven a tapestry, and today Poirot would unravel it. The Ashford sapphire's truth awaited, and he would deliver it with the precision of a maestro. The guests gathered in the grand hall at noon, summoned by Lord Ashford at Poirot's discreet request. The hall was a cathedral of opulence, its marble floor gleaming beneath chandeliers that sparkled like frozen starlight. Tapestries of mythical beasts loomed on the walls, their eyes seeming to follow the assembled company. Lord and Lady Ashford, Lionel, Clara Beaumont, Miss Evelyn Harrow, Mr. Whitby, and a handful of minor guests, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Poirot stood at the hall's centre, his cane resting lightly in his hand, his posture commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and unadorned by Dubois' theatrical flair. "I am not Antoine Dubois, art dealer, of Paris. I am Hercule Poirot, detective, summoned here by Lord Ashford to unmask a scandal that threatens this noble house." Gasps rippled through the room, and Lady Ashford's hand tightened on her husband's arm. Clara's eyes narrowed, but she remained still, a statue in charcoal grey. Lord Ashford stepped forward, his face pale but resolute. "Explain yourself." "Poirot, why the deception?" Poirot's gaze swept the room. "Disguise, my lord, allows one to see what others conceal. And in this manner, much has been hidden. The Ashford sapphire, yes, but also motives of greed, revenge, and betrayal." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Let us begin with the sapphire, said to be lost, cursed, stolen. It was never stolen, was it? It was hidden, protected by a family wary of its legacy." He turned to Lady Ashford, whose lavender shawl trembled slightly. "Madame, your grandmother's tiara, displayed in the gallery, once held the gem. But your father, fearing its allure, concealed it within the manor. I found an empty niche behind a painting, but it was not the sapphire's true hiding place. Was it?" Lady Ashford's lips parted, but no sound came. Poirot continued, his voice steady. The slashed painting was a distraction, orchestrated to divert attention from the real prize. And the séance, with its spectral figure, was a clever ruse to terrify you into revealing the gem's location. Lionel, you confessed to staging it, driven by debts that choke you. Lionel's face flushed, his hands clenching. "I told you I needed the money, but I didn't steal anything." "Nan, you did not," Poirot agreed, his eyes softening. "You were a pawn, manipulated by another. The forged documents in the greenhouse, implicating you in selling the sapphire, were planted to ensure your ruin. But who would benefit from such a scheme?" All eyes turned to Clara Beaumont, who stood rigid, her hands clasped tightly. Poirot stepped toward her, his cane pointing like a conductor's baton. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, or should I say, Elise Grayson, you are no governess, but a descendant of the Grayson family, sworn enemies of the Ashfords. The letters in the hidden passage revealed your family's claim to the sapphire, a feud that spans generations. You infiltrated this household, posing as Clara, to reclaim what you believe is yours. Clara Illis flinched, her composure cracking. "You have no proof," she said, her voice low but defiant. Poirot smiled, producing the note from his pocket. "This, slipped under my door, smells of lavender Madame Ashford's scent, but written in a hand that matches the forged documents. A clever attempt to mislead me, and the cloaked figure in the greenhouse, your accomplice, was none other than the groundskeeper, was it not? He warned me of ghosts in the walls, hoping to scare me off. The groundskeeper standing at the hall's edge shifted uncomfortably, his weathered face pale. Poirot pressed on. But the true clue was the note's message. Look to the heart, not a person, but a placely statue of Apollo in the gallery, its base hollowed to conceal the sapphire. I examined it this morning, and there it was, safe all these years." It gestured to a servant, who entered carrying a velvet box. Poirot opened it, revealing a sapphire the size of a quail's egg, its facets blazing in the chandelier's light. The guests gasped, and Lady Ashford's hand flew to her throat. "My father's secret," she whispered. "He hid it to protect us." Elisa's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. "It was ours," she said, her voice breaking. "The Ashfords stole it from my family. I only wanted justice." Poirot's gaze was stern, but not unkind. "Justice, mademoiselle, does not come through deceit. You forged documents, staged the séance, and slashed the painting to sow chaos. But the sapphire belongs to this house, and your revenge ends here." Lord Ashford stepped forward, his voice firm. "Miss Grayson, you will leave my home. The authorities will decide your fate." Elise nodded, tears in her eyes, and the groundskeeper was escorted out. His role as her accomplice confirmed, Lionel sank into a chair, relief and shame warring on his face. "I'm sorry, father. I let her manipulate me." Lord Ashford placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "We will face your debts together, Lionel. The sapphire will stay hidden, safe from greed." He turned to Poirot, his eyes grateful. "You've saved our family, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot bowed slightly. "It is the little grey cells, my lord. They see what the heart conceals." As the guests dispersed, Evelyn approached, her eyes wide with admiration. "You were marvellous, Monsieur Poirot, like a magician." He chuckled, adjusting his tie. "Nan, mademoiselle, merely a man who observes." With the mystery solved, Poirot took his leave, declining an offer to stay longer. The manor's secrets were laid bare, its wounds beginning to heal. He walked to the waiting car, the sapphire's blue fire lingering in his mind, a reminder of the brilliance of truth. As the car rolled down the gravel drive, Poirot gazed at the Cotswolds' rolling hills, their beauty untouched by the manors. "Drama," he smiled, his moustache curling upward. Another puzzle solved, another family restored. The world, for now, was in order, and Hercule Poirot was ready for whatever mystery awaited next. Ending as the train carried Poirot back to London. He leaned back in his seat, content with a mystery unravelled and a family saved. The sapphires. Curse was no more, and his little grey cells rested, poised for the next adventure.